have some of our speakers lined up here. And again, that conference happens in March 27th to 30th in Scottsdale. We hope to see many of you there in person. It's one of our favorite events of the year, and we look forward to just continuing to build our relationships with you in person in Phoenix this year. So sign up now. And Zaya's dropped the link in the chat for you, so make it easy and pop over to the site anytime you want. Looks like we've got a lot of people calling in from Nashville, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, so welcome everyone. Before I introduce the rest of our facilitators, just wanted to let you know a few of our other upcoming calls that we've got coming up at the end of the month. We are going to discuss why learning is key to a healthy culture with Kevin Oakes and Brenda Sugri from EY. Our talent acquisition next practices calls continues on talent acquisition and growth in October. And just a few other calls rounding out the month of October on enhancing the employee experience and strategic HR next practices. So hope to see you on all of those calls. Very easy to sign up with our upcoming I4CP events with the link that Zeta just shared in the chat. And with that, I'm going to introduce the rest of our facilitators. We've got Eric Davis here sharing the screen with me. He's the creative director and senior editor here at I4CP. And then welcome again, Jackie Robertson, the chair of our I4CP Chief Diversity Officer Board and the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. We're so excited to have all of you on the call. Keep your questions coming in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat for the rest of the hour. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jackie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nina. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Just a few comments before we introduce our guest speaker today. So we all occasionally get the question, what book have you read recently? Or is there a book you're reading or read recently that you're truly enjoying? And although the genres may vary from person to person, thriller, non-fictional, autobiography, romance, most people seem to be pretty passionate about their recommendations for a good read. Others I've asked seem to enjoy the more serious topics, war and peace type books. I don't know about you, but I fell asleep when I read it decades ago. I'd fall asleep today. Hashtag not judging, but it's just not for me. The volume of pages alone is daunting. So what am I reading today? I think I mentioned in a previous monologue that I read How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. Undelivered, a new one by Jeff Nussbaum. It's about undelivered speeches that would have rewritten history. Pretty cool. I recommend it. What's most insightful is a choice people make when they have precious downtime to simply enjoy a great book. We look for that perfect book, right? Downtime is scarce. And so there's this unrelenting focus on choosing the perfect book, one that puts us in our happy place. I submit to you that would not be War and Peace for me. On the beach, that's a huge oxymoron with a capital oxy. So what did I read most recently when I was in the hotel pool lounge in Palm Springs? I was reading a book on kindness. Do you know how many books have been written on kindness? Me either. I Googled it. Here's what I got. The 100 Best Kindness Kids Book, the ultimate list of the best children's book about kindness. I counted at least 30, so that's 130. However, if these numbers are accurate, meaning 100 books for kids and 30 for adults, I suspect we adults probably need it more than our children. Are we not reaching our children or teaching our children to be entitled? Is that what we're doing? So we need to fix the kids and not the adults? It harkens back to a time when executives said we need to fix the women rather than fix the issue, of course, but I digress. There's been so much research on the power of kindness at work. One article suggests that organizations benefit from actively fostering kindness. In workplaces where acts of kindness become the norm, the spillover effects can multiply fast. In short, when people receive an act of kindness, they pay it forward. Many articles written on kindness at work. One book titled, Don't Underestimate the Power of Kindness at Work, and it talks about the transformation of the workplace into scheduled online meetings, as you know, has led to another source of deprivation, the removal of those serendipitous encounters in the workplace. And for many, hearing a colleague say, thank you so much in the hallway, or a manager telling a great job after a presentation, were the highlight of office life. And now these seem like traditions from another lifetime. The author goes on to say, we don't seem to have the same opportunities for social connection. And without them, it can be much harder to find the joy in our work. So what should be done? The book goes on to suggest one simple word: kindness. Most management advice is focused on how to sustain productivity during and after the pandemic, yet the power of kindness has been largely overlooked. A recent BBC article discusses that suspicion was the strongest reaction to kindness. One woman who was visiting her local cafe was given an extra free cup of coffee, so she thought she might as well take it around and see if other customers would like a free treat instead. She was met with stares of bewilderment. She was met with suspicion. Had she spat on it? Is it poisoned? She ended up feeling that she had somehow acted wrongly when all she wanted to do was offer a free gift. So for a period of 2 weeks, one woman tried to offer strangers an umbrella on a rainy day, pay for someone's parking ticket, let fellow shoppers jump in line ahead of her at the checkout. Suspicion was the strongest reaction throughout. Each time, it was only when she offered a rational explanation, such as the fact she was waiting for someone at the checkout, that people would accept her offers. She points to research showing that people have become individualistic over the last few decades and score about 40% lower on tests of empathy than those who were brought up in the 1970s. Perhaps we're just less used to being kind and receiving kindness in return. One researcher in the article found that spite and greed are far more likely to ripple through a population than generosity. If someone is stingy, we are more likely to pay it forward, that negative behavior, to the next person, he explains. When I think of the heavy lift for all of you practitioners, the heavy lift required to be successful in any DE&I strategy, I still believe the foundation of any strategy must be a focus on the organizational culture. We've all heard the expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. It stands to reason if we need to shift mindsets and cultures to move the diversity agenda, then concepts like inclusion, well-being, kindness, empathy will be the stars of the show. We'll need to create pathways to help people leaders who can role model DE&I and who can be held accountable for related actions and outcomes. If the business case for DE&I were enough to get us there, we'd be there by now. Most executives, when asked, why is creating a diverse and equitable and inclusive company important to you? You hear responses like, diversity makes us more innovative. Diverse companies are more profitable. We want our team to mirror our customer base. And while these business cases are compelling and true, Michelle Majunkim tells us that building up on the business case as the foundation for DE&I efforts often leads to initiatives, but rarely lasting, meaningful change. So if that's the why, I think it's unsustainable. Otherwise, from people include, I believe everyone should be treated equally, regardless of background. Our children should inherit a better world. It's the right thing to do. But if we're going to move this agenda, we need a why that includes ourselves in it. I'm going to say that one more time. If we're going to move this agenda forward, we need a why that includes ourselves in it. One that recognizes our roles, our capabilities, our spheres of influence, if you will. And that means your why can not only be about others. When you frame your desire to achieve social justice solely for the benefit of someone else, for example, I want to support others. I want everyone else to have the same chances and opportunities I had. It becomes too easy to give up when the path gets too difficult, to confuse solidarity with saviorism. When it's a motivation to do or be a helper or a do-gooder, to help with other folks' problems, it has a shelf life that's dependent on our own internal threshold for personal sacrifice. Example, I tried coaching Ellie Jones. I told her how to dress for success. I told her what to say. I told her how to be a good corporate citizen. Now she wants more of my time. I can't continue to mentor her because that will run into my after time work, or worse, I may not be able to hang out with my girls this weekend. This why relies on our good hearts and desires to be seen as good people and our fluctuating emotional and intellectual material capabilities. It works until it doesn't. It works until we realize the personal sacrifice is too much. Said simply, the business case focused solely on it's the right thing to do is not sustainable. Our liberation is bound together And that's the most enduring why, because it directly involves ourselves. An example, and you might have heard this in the news recently, a woman who was raped by the same man who murdered Eliza Fletcher says Memphis police had more than enough evidence to charge him 1 year before he kidnapped and killed billionaire heiress while she was jogging. It's a sad story. It's a gruesome story. I know. Alicia Franklin reported being raped in September by a man she met online. She immediately reported it. She reported the sexual assault to the Memphis police, who processed the rape kit. They took DNA samples. Franklin's rape kit sat around for more than a year before they tied it to the rapist. He was charged in the rape, but only after he was arrested for the kidnapping and murder of billionaire heiress Eliza Fletcher. It makes you wonder why some cases take priority over others. Some police department, police officer, assistant, somebody decided for whatever reason they were too busy to look into Ms. Franklin's assault. What if the leader of that police department insisted that someone take the time, someone reprioritized the workload that day, or the leader made it easier for someone to stay at work another 2 or 3 hours? Perhaps if someone made a self-sacrifice, an additional investment of time, and investigated the original assault, the murder of Ms. Fletcher could have been prevented. I know it's a gruesome story and it was an extreme example, but the concept remains the same in corporate organizations. In other words, you can't distance yourself from the issues you are trying to solve. People leaders can't distance themselves through rationalizations like, I don't want to give negative feedback to Jenny. I might say the wrong thing. I don't want to criticize Luke for saying anything that might have been misinterpreted by Jenny because Luke brought in $5 million in revenue last year. I'm not about to get in the middle of that social bickering in my team. They need to figure it out. I say to all of you on this call today, diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners, you know this is hard work. You're dealing with mindsets and entrenched beliefs. Our nation is divided and many organizations are merely microcosms of our society. So what does all this have to do with kindness? I believe if you practice it enough, if you focus on the self-discipline, the willpower, the courage required to be kind, even when it's inconvenient, these simple and consistent behaviors may yield a more sustainable result in creating more diverse and inclusive organizations. And unless people leaders are willing to engage in this manner, I wonder if there's any accountability metric that will change the course of diversity to a sustainable result where diversity, equity, and inclusion truly is in the DNA of the organization. I'm saddened that meanness ripples through organizations faster and more deeply than kindness. However, I'm encouraged that each of you on this call will continue to persevere on this journey amidst all these new obstacles. Can't say gay. These books are banned in schools. Legacy issues around diversity training. Lawsuits becoming those who have been involving those who've been privileged believe that this is a zero-sum game and they will have less of the proverbial pie. So thank you for those of you on this call for your perseverance, diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners. I know this work is not easy. It's even more complex today than it ever was. Thank you for helping our people leaders understand that our collective liberation is bound together. Thank you for helping people leaders understand that this is the only and the most enduring why. In short, thank you for your compelling leadership. As for me, know that I'm bound with you and our collective liberation. We are bound together in this most enduring why. I'm continuing to read my books on kindness and practice the self-discipline required to achieve the most enduring why for our work ahead. And with that, I am so proud to introduce our guest speaker today, Eloiza Domingo. Eloisa, welcome.
Thanks so much, Jackie. How's everybody doing today?
Doing great. And I just have a few things to say about you. I clearly have read about you and some of the fantastic work that you're doing at Allstate. Eloisa is the Vice President of Human Resources and our Chief Inclusive Diversity and Equity Officer. I'm just looking at the list of accolades, Eloisa, and it's not amazing knowing you the way I know you, but it is certainly just an amazing recognition of who you are and your trailblazing efforts in this field. So I can't thank you enough for being here today. I know that you are focused on some trailblazing efforts within Allstate. I know that folks are familiar with Allstate, and we're going to get into that in your role in a minute. But before we do that, I want to give this audience a chance just to get to know you a little bit better. And I want to start with the quote, how compelling that is. The two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I absolutely love that quote. I remember when my son was 5 years old, he asked me, Mommy, why am I here? How do you answer something like that? You know, especially when, if you're still as an adult struggling to figure out what's your why. So tell this audience a little bit more about your why.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jackie. So, you know, I like you said, I really love that quote. I almost to the button remember the actual day when I was doing this work at Cincinnati Children's and had accomplished kind of a big program, something that I really I don't think I knew exactly what I was doing. I was just kind of going with my gut. And, you know, when you go with your gut and something happens really just kind of amazingly, right? For me, that was almost on the button, the moment that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of good at this, you know, and not just good at it. Like it wasn't very hard, you know, for me to accomplish something and reach that success at Cincinnati Children's for that particular program. And I remember thinking, I thought that, you know, your career or your job was supposed to be hard. And that's when I found that, you know, quote. So, you know, for me, you know, your monologue earlier, Jackie, was really powerful. And, you know, for me, my why for a while was a lot of those business cases that you mentioned, you know, the Boston Consulting Group, you know, 19% profitability for more diverse executives, you know, that means there's a number, 33% of the, you know, profitability for this, XYZ. And then I had kids. I have two sets of twins. I have 14-year-old boys who are in high school and 9-year-old boys who are in 4th grade. And they identify as both white and Filipino. And that, you know, the world just completely turned, you know, on its head. And 3 of them can identify as white. I mean, you would look at them and frankly, you would think, oh, these are white, you know, kiddos. And then one of them is a little bit darker than me, actually. And I've seen them be treated differently. I've even, you know, the way that kids act to them or teachers or whatever like that. And my world really, the business case for me shifted and my why became very different at that time. So it strengthened, right?
You know, Eloisa, I want to talk a little bit about, I still can't get over the fact that you have 2 sets of twins. We'll come back to that at another time. I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Allstate, but I will be very transparent and say that you inspired that monologue in large part because of the way you are working around some of the obstacles that you are dealing with right now at Allstate. But before we get to that, and I do want you to talk about your role, tell us what's top of mind for you right now. And this can be with just in general, it can be with regard to personal, professional, societal. What's top of mind for you right now?
That's a great question, Jackie. So I don't even remember if I told you or your team when we were prepping for this call, where I was going to be when I took this call. So I'm in DC right now, a couple miles from the Capitol. I was a witness to Congress on Tuesday. What's today? Thursday? On Tuesday afternoon for the subcommittee on diversity and inclusion for the House Financial Services Committee. If you want to, if anybody on the call wants to look it up, it's under, again, the House Financial Services Committee. And it is the review of diversity and inclusion at America's largest insurance companies. I've never testified at a hearing. I've never been in a deposition. I've never been in a court. And, you know, that's kind of top of mind for me, Jackie, because sitting here in our nation's capital, having been at a Congress hearing, it was so intimidating. And it was actually a majority hearing. It was for the Democrats. But it was fraught with a lot of push on what we do every day, what corporations do every day around diversity. It was fraught with questions about why aren't you doing more? Why is the journey so long? Why does it take so long to make any change? And honestly, Jackie, and you and I have been in this field for a really long time. It was a little bit frustrating, because when you watch these hearings, you have 5 minutes to respond, and oftentimes they can cut you off, right? And I just wanted to shake the microphone and say, I'm on your side. Like we're all trying to do the same thing. And actually the work that you all are doing on the subcommittee here in Congress is actually helping us in the corporate world really move things forward. Now, I will say, I really appreciate the fact that they did an audit of the largest insurance companies, asked us really hard questions, asked for full disclosure of our data. So, for me, it's a little bit it is top of mind, because I keep thinking, how could I possibly bring this conversation back to Allstate and continue it, in a really meaningful way? This is the first time in Allstate history that anyone has testified in front of Congress for Allstate. So I'm honored to have been able to do that, especially on this topic and especially at this time in our world.
It's incredible. So first of all, congratulations, and thank you for binding us all together.
Yeah.
And just going in front of them, and wow, I can't imagine that. I can imagine if that was very intimidating, but it sounds like you pulled through it very smoothly. And you have a lot to talk about back at Allstate. And so speaking of Allstate, I can't imagine anybody on this call does not know that name.
Yeah.
But I can imagine having an opportunity to have a look inside Allstate and just see some of the very compelling work that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about, I look at, the slide with everything that you've done, and it's clear you are a disruptor. But what became clear to me when we talked last week is that you're disrupting the status quo in your role at Allstate. So can you tell us a little bit about that? What does that look like? What's going on? What are the headlines?
Yeah, Jackie, prior to Allstate, I was over at Astellas Pharma, and I really didn't want to leave. Anyone who was at Astellas right now, you all know that culture is incredible, and I really didn't. I had no intention of leaving. Allstate called and said, "Listen, we'd really like you to help lead our efforts and kind of make us one of the best in the industry." And I said, "No, no, thanks. I mean, I really like Astellas. I really like pharmaceuticals. Like you, Jackie, I came from academic healthcare. Pharmaceuticals was kind of a step close, but enough away, because I had been in that field for about 10 years. I had no desire to leave, and I remember having a conversation with our CEO, Tom Wilson. And, between me and everybody else on this call, I didn't want that job. I was like 10 minutes late for the call, which is horrible. Nobody do that to a CEO, by the way, or to anybody for that matter. And I remember thinking, I don't want this job. I'm just going to ask him a really hard question. And I said, so, how has Allstate been a part of systemic racism, primarily redlining? How have you been a part of that, even, secondarily or tertiarily? How are you taking responsibility as an insurance, company and doing more with that? And I remember Jackie thinking, he's never going to answer this question. He probably doesn't really even know what redlining is. So I kind of sat back in my chair. Not only did he lean in and talk openly about racism, systemic bias in the insurance company, how insurance uses primarily, your credit score, and how that is systemically racist, and how Allstate is the only company right now using telematics to actually shift, which is essentially the way that you drive. The way that you drive has no correlation to race or gender or socioeconomic status. It's just the way that you drive. And using that actually to create access to more equitable insurance products. I just remember thinking, oh crap, like he's answering this question. And not only that, he's leaning in and asking me about what I think about telematics and talking to me about racism in a very intelligent and engaged way. I would have never come to Allstate, Jackie, had that conversation not happened. I'll be really honest. And since then, Tom and I have been really connected on, just like you said, disrupting. So my position goes up to the CHRO, which is very typical in most organizations. But I told him, and I told, the organization, I really need to have full scope of this work. And it has happened. I am primarily responsible for 3 goals diversity representation and specifically in upper leadership, because we're doing great with our diversity in kind of manager and below. But from senior manager and above, we've got a lot to do. So that's number one. The second goal is diversity in our investment portfolio. And number three is diversity, supplier diversity spend. So 2 out of 3 of my goals have to do with, where Allstate is spending its money, that talk the talk, walk the walk, kind of thing. It's incredible. It's incredible to work for a company like that and to disrupt, as you mentioned, we've been talking about diversity and inclusion for a long time in terms of people and culture, but shifting that about how you're actually investing your money and how you're shifting the wealth gap is important to me.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. As I think about that, I think a lot of folks on the call are probably working on representation of diversity in the higher levels of the organization. How are you thinking about going about that? With the talent market still being what it is a talent market. What are your strategies in terms of increasing representation at the higher level? Do you have a build strategy? Can you build from within? Do you have a buy strategy? Do you have some combination of both? How are you focused on that?
Yeah, so great question. So number one, let me just kind of quickly throw some stats out. 54% of Allstate's population is female. 42% of our whole population is identifies as racially or ethnically diverse. 71% of our directors or above identify as either a person of color or a female of color, which is a pretty good percentage. 60% of our board identifies as either a female or a person of color, and we'll be adding soon a Black female. I'm lucky to be able to say that actually to you now. So our diversity will go up. However, Jackie, where we're really hurting is our middle, how they call it the frozen middle. Our hiring practices bring in more diversity now than ever before in Allstate history. So much, in fact, that we set a goal last year to make sure that we were hiring over the labor available market. And we're doing that. But we're hiring them in mostly the diversity that we're hiring in at that level is actually mostly at our manager and below. We are not doing that great of a job for our manager and above. So to your point, Jackie, for us, it is a hybrid strategy. It is looking for the right talent, diverse talent outside of Allstate and bringing them in, but also looking at how we are retaining, building, developing, sponsoring. We don't have sponsorship programs. That's a huge miss for us. So we're developing it this year. Sponsorship programs and things like that. So what I'll say is for those of you on the call that may be having similar issues, look at your data first. Like really look at your data and try to figure out, and that's why I started with stats. How are we actually doing and where is our actual deficit? And then kind of do your algorithms. If we hire more at these levels, is it actually going to get us anywhere? Again, our hiring is fantastic. Our diversity hiring exceeds the national availability. That's still not getting us to where we need to be. It's just not. So then you also need to make sure that you're building, from inside and figuring out how that strategy is going to get you to where you want to go.
Understood. Love the data first approach. I have so many more questions for you, but I want to be cognizant of any questions that the audience might have in the chat, Eloisa. So I'm going to turn it over to Nina, who is always monitoring our chat. And Nina, are there any questions or comments for Eloisa?
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of admiration coming in for you, Eloisa, and just the programs you built. I got one question that just slid into my private messages. Just some curiosity around what you did to change your hiring practices to get where you are now. Are there some actionable insights that other people can apply to what they're doing?
Sure. And Jackie actually said it earlier. She said that, chief diversity officers, oftentimes they kind of hold the weight of the world. That's not, frankly, that is not sustainable for chief diversity officers. That's not sustainable for companies, because what happens is it becomes personality dependent. So Cleveland Clinic would then be, dependent on Jackie. What happens if Jackie leaves? Allstate becomes dependent on me. What happens if I leave? That's not true diversity and inclusion. So number one, Sean Berry, who is our vice president for talent acquisition, he came on to Allstate a month after I came on. He's from Walgreens. And honestly, Nina, people say, what's your strategy? Hire a really good talent acquisition vice president. Like, I didn't have to talk to him at all about diversity. Even today, Sean is one of my major partners. It's also one of those things where, well, I'll go to him and I'll say, hey, Sean, I kind of want to move the needle up from 18% to like 20% in like a year. And he's like, we'll Eloisa, I'm just going to tell all my recruiters, we're going to do that in 6 months for you. He's like, we'll just do it. That's just all there is to it. And I'm like, what, really? Are you sure? He's like, no, we're just going to do it. And that, Nina, that kind of partnership, to have somebody who doesn't question, doesn't, just gets it, is invaluable. Now, for those of you who are still going to be working on that, again, number one, look at your data. Number two, make sure to look at the current talent strategies and talent acquisition strategies that you have. Where are you actually going? And then, Jackie said something earlier, the number one thing that you have to understand is your organizational culture, and then build off of that. Allstate has a real opportunity to look at skills-based hiring or capabilities-based hiring, which basically means you don't have to have a 4-year degree to work for us. You don't. So we adjusted all of our job descriptions. Did you know that after we did that, 87% of our job descriptions, 87%, now say you don't need a 4-year degree. We'll train you. That's incredible. That's something we didn't know until we actually looked, okay, wait, who are we actually? Do you really need a master's degree to be here? So those are some things like turning the mirror on yourself and asking yourself the hard questions. I'm telling you, after being at Congress, you want to ask yourself the hard questions before someone else does. You want to answer your own hard questions before someone else does, and create those solutions.
Powerful.
That's incredible. Love to hear that. Just the opportunity that creates for inclusion as well. Sheila Clark has her hand up, so would love to invite her to just come off on video and share your question.
Hi, I'm trying to get this picture up, but that's okay if you don't see me. So I wanted to say hello. I'm Sheila Clark from the Federal Reserve. I watched your whole testimony the other day.
Okay.
So I just want to let you know I've been there and I go there often. And yes, it is very intimidating.
It is.
So I just wanted to let you know I thought you did an exceptional job. And at some point we do need to connect, because we from the Federal Reserve have some oversight on Allstate. But I just wanted you to know that you did a fabulous job with the committee.
Sheila, thank you.
They're always intimidating, so don't take it personal.
Okay.
I just want to say that.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you for that, Sheila. Nina, any other questions in the chat?
No, I think we'll have more questions coming in soon, but the admiration for the work that you're doing just continues to roll in the chat. So Jackie, I'll let you take it a little further.
Outstanding. So Eloisa, one of the things I was thinking about when we're talking about redlining, I'm sure there are other disparities that exist. And I'm just curious about, I'm imagining you would have to have a pretty tight partnership with your legal counsel.
Yeah.
How does that work with you in this role? Because some people think, oh, legal, that means what you're doing is more of a compliance kind of role, and it's not. So talk to us about, how do you partner with your legal counsel? I was very impressed with that partnership when you and I were talking last week. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jackie. Yeah. So anytime that I go to a new organization, and I would, if there are any chief diversity officers or diversity leaders on this call, I would really encourage this for you as well. The two most important partnerships that you need to have are legal and communications. Make sure that you understand, and again, what Jackie said earlier, what is the organizational culture of legal? How much say so do they have? How much can they barrierize things? How much can they actually get you to a yes? What power do they have in the organization? Same with communications. Allstate's communications and brand team is incredible. They are outstanding. So and they really understood, diversity. Jackie, as soon as I got to Allstate, I wanted to meet all of the lawyers and understand who was going to be kind of assigned to the diversity efforts at Allstate. And then honestly, I just kind of had a theoretical conversation, like, what do you think about diversity? How does it feed into the work of legal here at Allstate? What is your job to support the efforts of diversity, not the chief diversity officer, but the diversity efforts in total? And the answer was great. It was like, we're going to get you to a yes. You know, I mean, it might not be the yes you originally designed, but we will get you to a yes. And we will make sure that we keep the organization safe. We keep you and your efforts safe. But we have, and I remember them saying this to me, you have to be honest with us and open quickly. Like if you hear something's going on, you hear something from one of your colleagues outside, you got to say something to us so that we can kind of look things up. Now, like many of your organizations, our legal and our risk teams, they are always in front of a lot. They're constantly monitoring. So 10 times out of 10, they're bringing me things as opposed to me saying, things. But a lot of it is just having, those relationships. Jackie, at one point, I work almost exclusively from home, and one of my younger boys, he said to me, Mom, all you do is talk on the phone. He's like, and you sounds like you're like talking to like your friends all the time. And I was like, no, I don't. And he goes, no, is that what a vice president does? Like a vice president, that's all they do is talk on the phone. And I remember thinking, you know what, I bet that's what it does look like. But then I thought, you know what, that is really what this role is about, is creating the relationships, like you said, leading with kindness, making sure that even if myself or the lawyers disagree with something, that I can understand why. One of our values, so we have what's called our shared purpose at Allstate, and we have 3 key principles. One of them is diversity and inclusion, which I lead. One of the next one is integrity, always operate and lead with integrity. And then the next one is always remember that the decisions and the way that you're handling yourself is always think about the company. Always think about how you're representing the company, how you're making decisions for the company. And so, that's why it was really critical for me to have a relationship, again, with legal on a pretty consistent basis. Operationally, I meet, I have one lawyer that's assigned to me. I meet with her. Her name is Tiffany. She's fantastic. I meet with her once a month. My team of directors meets with Tiffany's team twice a month. And then their data privacy team meets with my data team. Oh my gosh, it's almost weekly. So that we're just kind of constantly, talking and creating relationships.
But that's such an interesting balance, though. So when you think about attorneys, the fact that they said we want to protect the organization and your efforts, and it almost goes back what I was saying about kindness. I mean, that takes a self-discipline, it takes a courage, and when you think about it, it's like, when does it get to the point where they're going to protect your efforts until it becomes inconvenient? Oh, yeah. And it sounds like that is not the case for you. So I admire the relationship that you have with the attorneys, and the fact that they intend to do both. They intend to protect the organization and your efforts, not to the point where when the efforts become too inconvenient to protect, we're going to lean back on the organization. So, but given that, there's been several lawsuits faced by State Farm, Prudential, Met, alleging racial discrimination in past sales. So tell us a little bit about that, and how is that affecting your world? And acting as your advocate.
A lot of our peers, you already mentioned them, Prudential. So the suit that Prudential is battling pretty publicly right now regards, and I'll just talk very briefly. Of course, I can't speak with any major authority with this. They've had accusations of reverse discrimination from majority population, primarily white employees. State Farm is also, kind of being kind of publicly asked to talk about their race-based processes and operations, and then similar to Prudential, State Farm, I'm sorry, Starbucks is being kind of accused of setting race-based targets, the word target, and utilizing that verbiage in order to kind of implement affirmative action hiring. And when the Starbucks article came out, when any of these articles come out, essentially what happens is legal contacts me and we have a conversation about what we're doing. We do a quick review of my operations, again, to make sure that everything is okay. We do any education to critical stakeholders like talent acquisition, our HRBPs, those kinds of things. With Starbucks, what was really interesting is what they're doing. Many of their practices is actually what Allstate is doing, setting goals, being public about them, holding ourselves accountable, having our most senior leaders, our EVPs, the most accountable for hiring goals, as I mentioned, spend goals, those kinds of things. And they are tied to a certain level of accountability with their performance management.
Wow.
And so, of course, there was kind of a little bit of a tizzy, like, Allstate is a marquee name. Same with Starbucks. That's why oftentimes, we can be targeted. We could be, potentially be accused. I was so pleased that legal said, don't worry about it. Like, they were like, we've looked into it. You're right. Everything that you're doing, everything that we're doing is actually the same, if not similar to Starbucks. But I'll just remind you not to use the word target. We will remind you, that we talk about our commitments as aspirational. So they gave us guidance, and then they said, let's get into a meeting. We'll create the education, Eloisa. You don't have to do it. We will create the education for the recruiters, for the HRBPs. We'll make sure that we talk to the leadership. You're good, and they said, and we'll help lead this. And I just remember thinking, you just said to me that everything that they're being accused of doing wrong, we're doing here, but we're good. And we're not backing off. That's a thing, Jackie. Part of me was like, okay, kind of back it off, pull it back, Eloisa. It was like, no, like we've committed to this. We're doing it. There's nothing that we're doing wrong, and we have our lawyers in place. If anybody accuses us of something that's wrong, we will continue to support education. But and I remember, our lawyer saying to us and our chief HR officer, diversity and inclusion has been very supportive and very connected to legal. And I was really appreciative of them stating that relationship. And they said that we've been, because of this collaborative relationship, that's one of the reasons why we're not concerned. So yeah, you're right, Jackie. Even me saying this out loud, I know that I have a really, really lucky and valued relationship with our legal counsel.
Well, that's a testament for sure. And I just saw a comment pop up on the screen. It's a testament to your relationship building. And I hearken back to the words from one of your sons. Gee, Mom, it sounds like you're talking on the phone to your friends. And actually, maybe that's a good thing because it really is a testament to your relationship. So I'm going to pause at this point, see if there are any other questions before I turn it over to my colleague, Eric Davis, who's going to take us through a very quick and interesting poll. So Nina, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, of course. So obviously everyone is so impressed by your relationship building skills, the amount of passion that you have in your TA team, the amount of dedication you have from your legal team. How do you transfer some of that passion, or how do you keep that passion going with your business leaders?
Yeah, number one, as we mentioned, and continue to push, is just the relationship building, having continuous and consistent relationships, with them. One of the things that I actually really love about Allstate, in fact, is we really try to be very vulnerable with one another, especially at the leadership level. Like, we kind of all know each other's kids. We all, kind of know when they're going to graduate. Did somebody get a new dog? Did your kid have a kid, and that level of vulnerability also allows us to kind of just be human. And, Jackie, to your monologue earlier, kind, and really try to remember, because you're right, Jackie, when you said, because of the way that we are right now, unfortunately, it is harder to say like, oh, hey, you did a really nice job on your presentation. Why? Because after this presentation, like right now, when we're done in about 13 minutes, we're all going to log off and we're all going to go to our next. It's not, I don't think it's that the intent is that I didn't think that Jackie did a great job. It's like, well, I'll tell her next time, or I'll maybe when I see her. And so it just kind of becomes this, I don't know, thing in the atmosphere, So a lot of it is continuously building on vulnerability. And really, for me, something that I own, and I hope that you've seen it here, is modeling vulnerability, and being okay, sharing these things. As a young executive with 4 young kids. I'm a single mom. That is really vulnerable. There was a time when if I would have shared this, it would have been like, you're doing what? You know, and I maybe wouldn't have been seen as the most capable or somebody who had the time. You know, somebody would have made a decision for me. Somebody would have made a determination for me if I would have shared that information. Let me first I'll acknowledge that people like me, people like me and Jackie, I understand that we can share this stuff because we sit in a level of privilege. So we can say like, oh, I'm already a chief and yeah, I've got kids, you know, I mean, it's harder to knock off a chief than, you know, it would be kind of a lower level. So we do sit in a seat of privilege to be able to be vulnerable like this. At the same time, it's the Spider-Man thing, right? With great power comes great responsibility. You should be modeling then vulnerability. You should be, you know, open to saying, you know, I am a single mom and I've got 4 kids and it's hard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
Eloisa just froze for me.
I think we just had a freeze up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tell you what, Eric, is this a good time?
With me and Jackie.
Yeah.
There we
Okay.
go.
All right. Thank you so much, Eloisa. We're going to pause very quickly. Eric, take us through this very interesting poll, and then we'll go back to Eloisa for closing comments.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Hi, everyone. We just wanted to do a quick poll that goes along with the conversation we were having here. This is have current legal challenges in the news targeting organizational DE&I initiatives impacted any of your organization's current programs? So no, we're proceeding as normal. We have discussed them with legal, but no change. Yes, we have paused some practices pending legal outcomes, and then other. And if you had an other there, it would be nice if you could either share in the chat or come off mute and share with us. And we'll give a few minutes for people to fill that in. And let's see, get our results. Yeah, so most people are proceeding as normal. Several are having the same discussions you're having with legal, Eloisa, which I think is wise. Always to have a great relationship with legal. I know I work with the Chief Diversity Officer Board with Jackie and some of the others, and I know that having a strong relationship there can be very useful in the work. And yes, we've paused some practices pending legal outcomes and other. So if there was anyone who answered other, if you would like to share, we can give you a minute to do that. If not, let me see, I think I'll hand it back to Jackie here. Oh, also we had some other questions that I see popping up in the chat, so maybe we can hit some of those really quickly. Let me see, the first one I see here is, when and how did you know you felt psychologically safe enough to be vulnerable with your peers and leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if it's necessarily like a moment in time or when it was like, it's not, you know, it's time, you know. I do think that there is a gut feeling and kind of a professional gut as well, personal and professional gut that kind of tells you. I also frankly kind of shopped it around. I actually deliberately kind of talked to other women and men that I trusted and said, you know, you know that I'm a young executive. I have 4, you know, young kids. I am newly divorced. Do you think that what do you think about that? Me sharing. I did also have a very strong conversation with my communications team. I mean, for me, and I'm sure similar, you know, to Jackie and other chief diversity officers who are on here, a diversity of leadership, you serve as an ambassador of your organization as well. So you are a brand ambassador. So they want to be very careful about, you know, whatever personal things you're sharing and whether or not it's going to hurt the brand or enhance the brand. So I did have to have a conversation. That's part of my responsibility. And it was affirming it was affirming in that moment to have many personal colleagues say, oh my gosh, Eloisa, what? No, yeah, like it'll be fine. And also kind of, again, I cannot underline enough what Jackie said earlier, understand the organizational culture. Had I been at other organizations, I don't know if I would have felt that psychological safety, to do that. But at Allstate and at Astellas Pharma, where I was experiencing some of life's changes, I felt very supported to be able to bring that forward.
That's great. I think it's wonderful that you have a place where you can feel psychologically safe to really be, it's part of that bring your whole self to work thing that we talk about a lot in our work.
Yeah, keep going with some of those comments. I see some popping up and I'd love to share them with Eloisa more broadly.
Yeah. Well, first, I know we had another question, like, how do you create authentic relationships within your teams, and how do you see this matriculate down to other levels?
Yeah, so I have incredible leadership on my team. Actually, one of my directors is on right now, Nicole Arobino. So she shared actually the link from the hearing earlier. So she's one of my directors. Danielle Sly is another one of my directors. I have a chief of staff, April Lugo. Get yourself really good teams. I mean, oftentimes in leadership positions, I unfortunately can't be with my team as often. So you have to have a team. Somebody wrote in the chat about trust, where you can kind of close your eyes and turn your back and you can trust, that your team is not only operationally going to keep kind of the train moving down the road, but they're going to be like, no, here's what Eloisa means. Eloisa, this is kind of the vision. Here's what she actually meant by that, but also kind of almost serve as like an interpreter of what vision or role I have. But at the same time, they turn around and say, Eloisa, no. Like, I ask my team all the time to manage me all the time. Eloisa, no, that's not going to work, or you're making that's going to break down the morale of the team right now because they're working really hard to put one more program on top of that, or do we really have a business case for that? Having the ability to also humble yourself and be able to take a no. As a leaders can oftentimes be very intimidating for their teams. What I say goes, and this is what I want. Hierarchical bias is real, right? To be able to listen and for them to say, no, I don't think that that's right. And then to say, okay, I understand, and I trust you, sometimes there are things where they will say no, and I'll say, no, we got to keep going, and this is a business case and this is why it's happening. But I hope that my team would agree that a lot of times I open it up for discussion. Like, we have to have a discussion about this. I want to make sure we're okay. So yeah, I mean, again, humility, kindness, constant conversation, of course, and being able to be humble in your own leadership is important.
Yeah, that goes along so well with what we've seen in our research at I4CP, where there used to be this feeling that as a leader, you really had to know it all and have the answers to everything. And, just that transition from a know-it-all kind of culture to a learn-it-all culture where you're open to other people's feedback, I think really enriches the culture so much. So
yeah, agreed.
So let me see, we have 4 minutes left. Let me hand this back to Jackie right now.
So with that 4 minutes left, Eloisa, you tend to get into some really wonderful depth when you answer these questions. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and I know it's a quick question, but it's a serious question. What are you most proud of right now and why?
So I'll say this from a personal and a professional perspective. So personally, I'm really proud that, as I mentioned earlier, my older twins started high school this year, and within the first, third or fourth week, they're on the honor roll. So I'm very, very proud of that. And then professionally, am really proud of supporting Allstate through the congressional hearing this past week. As a note, we were the only insurance company that volunteered to be at the hearing. We didn't have to be there. We didn't have to share our data. We didn't have to send an executive. We didn't have to. We could have sat just like everybody else. We chose not to. And we asked Congresswoman Beatty and Congresswoman Waters if they would allow us to be there and testify. I'll tell you what, how Sheila said earlier, it was really hard. It was hard. It was really, really hard. And at times during the hearing, I was like, why did we do this? Why did we decide to do this? But I am very proud of that Allstate was that humble to say, we don't have it all together. We're actually working really hard to be better. And that's what we're here to talk about, is the good and also the bad.
Fantastic.
I'd like to just jump in and share. I just yesterday finished reading, I think it was the third report from that subcommittee that
Yep.
came out.
Yeah.
And they are doing some really great work and surfacing some great information. And I can't wait to see future reports that come out, especially anything including your testimony.
That's awesome.
Eloisa, with the time that we have left, I don't want to just jump to the next call without acknowledging you today and acknowledging just your brilliance, the trails that you are blazing ahead going forward. I appreciate the work you're doing. More importantly, I appreciate you. And I certainly appreciate this I4CP team. They are definitely leading the way in all things. So thank you for being our guest speaker. I hope we can have you back.
I would love
Look
to.
forward to seeing you at the conference
Yes.
in March.
Yes.
So listen, take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take a minute to acknowledge your colleague with the 1 minute we have remaining. Take care, everyone.
And if we have just a minute, I would like to take a second just to promote I4CP has a new survey that is in the field right now till October 3rd. This is what's next for corporate culture, and it builds on our previous culture renovation research, which we brought up several times on these calls. This one will be looking more at changes in culture after the pandemic. Looking at the elements of a healthy culture versus a toxic culture, what programs and policies people are using to shift their cultures. And I think we have the survey link there at the bottom of the screen. So if you get a chance, and I think Nina has just posted the research link to that survey for anyone who'd like to jump over and take it. So please, if you get a chance, help us out with our research, and we'll be sharing some findings on that in later calls. So
That's awesome. All right, with that, everyone, thank you so much. Eloisa, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day and your week. Be safe out there. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.